Hello, everybody. Recording live from somewhere.
Welcome, everybody, back to the Pursuit Pod. First off, I hope everyone had a good 3-day weekend. Obviously, if you're in school or if you're working, happy Martin Luther King Day. But we've got a lot on our plate today here in late January, so I just think that we really should just get right into it, right into the Roundball Rock section of the pod. First off, we got to talk about the New York Knicks. So they've had a bad start to this calendar year. They've lost 9 of their last 11, and people have been talking about it as if it's payback for the lack of an NBA Cup banner. In this span of last 11 games, they've had a bottom 5 defense, and it's just, and people are talking about the Mike Brown system, maybe saying that it's no wonder that he was fired outside of Sacramento, and that the fact that he, that the Kings fired him after he was such a good coach, but maybe there is a true case to make about how the players just don't work with him. Knicks right now are 27th in opponent three-point percentage, while they've actually fallen to 23rd in the league in January so far for three-point shooting, just overall with their efficiency. I mean, right now, Karl-Anthony Towns, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby are all struggling. The depth isn't doing their magic. Yabusele isn't doing anything. Jordan Clarkson came in this offseason. He's not doing a lot. So right now, there's just a lack of urgency. That's what Mike Brown's excuse has been for the New York Knicks. He's been saying that we haven't figured out how to be physical for 48 minutes in the last I don't know how many games. And right now, there's been rumors about friction in the locker room for the New York Knicks. And this is something that has to be ironed out now. Tracy McGrady had a report where he said that there's clearly something going on behind the scenes in the Knicks locker room. There was a report talking about how Jalen Brunson had a players-only meeting and tried to get everyone going together to try to say, look yourself in the mirror. This isn't on Mike Brown. This isn't on the coaching staff. This is just on us. It's just the lack of urgency with us. It's the lack of effort with us. And I mean, you can look at any player on the team. Obviously, they're not going to want to trade Jalen Brunson or Josh Hart, but Karl-Anthony Towns, negative 66 net since the new calendar year began. He clearly doesn't like Mike Brown. He keeps defending Tom Thibodeau. He keeps defending that play style, that style of coaching, and that that grit that he had. But the fact that Cat is negative 66 right now, maybe we're just back to the soft player that Jimmy Butler exposed him as being in Minnesota. This guy who came into New York, made them, clear championship contenders there in the Eastern Conference Finals last year, and they've just been, they were on a really good run to start out the year. They were doing amazing. They had I think it was 8 or 9 losses, and then the NBA Cup happens. They don't put up the banner, and then they've just been on the downward trend recently. And their guys have been, you could say that Brunson was out, and Bridges doesn't go out, but you could say that Brunson was out. But when he came back, they got blown out by the Mavericks. So I think this trade deadline, we might see some chaos incoming for the New York Knicks, especially with, they've been linked to the Antetokounmpo trade all year. There's potential deals coming in with Memphis, Orlando, and Charlotte for Karl-Anthony Towns. But how many people are willing to take the risk on Karl-Anthony Towns, who, again, he's been exposed as being a soft player before? Yeah, he scores a lot. Yeah, he gets the numbers. Yeah, he's a great fit in New York. But if it's not going to work out with Mike Brown, who, it started out the year great, but if it's not going to work out with Mike Brown, who has been a proven, Coach of the Year candidate, Coach of the Year winner, a guy who brought Sacramento, of all franchises, out from the ground and rose them up. They started lighting the beam under him. It's just, what's going on with the New York Knicks? Why are they going on such a downward spiral? And is it Karl-Anthony Towns to blame? Is it not Jalen Brunson? Is it not Mikal Bridges? Reports have been saying that literally everyone on the team is on the block besides Brunson and Hart. They're the foundation. They're the catalyst of the team. But how much can you point the fingers at it? How much can you point the fingers at Cat? How much can you point the fingers at Mikal Bridges? Especially with, they have decent depth, but how much is that a factor with the fact that you've traded for all those guys for so many picks in recent years? And it's just, it really is a big question as to what's going to happen for the Knicks in the coming days, especially with the trade deadline coming up. Speaking of Jimmy Butler, we just mentioned him talking about Karl-Anthony Towns. Jimmy Butler tore his ACL to end his season against his former team, the Miami Heat. And, I mean, this is just, a dying star for a fading dynasty, which is how Steve Kerr put it. And their chances are now just dropped to complete zero. This might be the end of Jimmy Butler's prime at his age, now that he's in his later 30s. And, I mean, right now the Warriors are fighting for 8th place in a really crowded Western Conference. Their young stars haven't really developed, and the depth is gone. They're just in a bad spot. They've been relying on Curry. They've been relying on Draymond Green. There's no more Jordan Poole. There's no more Andrew Wiggins. They have Jimmy Butler now, but now that he's going to be injured, he's going to be out the rest of the year. The depth is just gone. And I mean, people might say that Jimmy Butler's already kind of phasing out of his prime and he's already phasing out of this and that, but let's be clear about the impact that he's made. He's the only player on the Warriors not to chuck up three-pointers. He consistently attacks the basket, always plays aggressive. He scored 370 total points in the paint this year. And I mean, if you remove Curry and Jimmy Butler from the equation, the Warriors are only 36% on three-pointers this year. And even with Jimmy Butler's injury, the fact that he's going to be just taking up cap space on the bench, not going to play the rest of the year, they should look into trading him. He owes $54 million in dead cap to the Warriors. How much can you do with Curry being older and then the depth not being too promising for a huge package at the trade deadline? I mean, obviously, Jonathan Kuminga has been talking about how he's been demanding a trade. He hasn't been happy for a while in Golden State, but I mean, I think that his role is going to increase. I think that he's going to come in, maybe have some impact. He hasn't played since mid-December, but maybe with Jimmy Butler being out, he's going to have an increased role. Maybe him and Steve Kerr can make a temporary reconciliation until they figure out something, but just with the depth not looking too promising, like how can you get a package out of this? I saw a report saying that the Warriors might go out and trade Jimmy Butler. And I mean, my only thing is it's just so much money. It's just so much money to have him on the bench. It's so much money to give him to another team for someone. I don't know who's going to take him. I don't know where he's going to want to play that's not Golden State. It's clear that he likes it here. It's clear that this is kind of his passion place. And, he already competed a lot with the Heat, already competed with, Timberwolves, Sixers beforehand. But now he's on the Warriors. This was kind of his last hurrah, trying to give Curry, another run at his money. But yeah, that's over now. I don't think the Warriors are going to be any better than they are already. They're already struggling as it is. They already were struggling as it is under Jimmy Butler. But right now, it's just not looking good. It's just not looking good all around for the Warriors. And I don't know what value that they can get out of a trade deadline deal now, especially with Butler out. They might have wanted to trade him before, but he was kind of their MVP for the most part. I mean, obviously Curry's the guy for the Warriors, and he has been his whole career. But again, just like I said, Butler's been the only one that's really been consistently attacking the basket. Hasn't just been the 2016 Steve Kerr Warriors where it's just been chucking up shots, and now the rest of the league has caught up to them. They kind of have to find versatility, and there's a lot of discussion about, Steve Kerr, is he the future of the Warriors too? But we have to just wait and see for both the Warriors and the Knicks to see what's going to go on, and see what's going to happen, especially at the trade deadline, because it is really a lot of moves could happen. A lot of franchises could either pick it up and figure it out, or they could just be left in the dust for a few years. And I'm seeing this left in the dust thing going on for the Warriors, especially with Curry's going to retire soon. Eventually, it's inevitably. He might have a few years left in him, but Butler's probably not going to come back from this ACL tear and be the same player. Jonathan Kuminga has basically been saying F you, Steve Kerr, for 2 or 3 years now. Draymond Green, he's old, and he makes an impact, but how much longer? They've just been holding on to their dying stars. They've been holding on to a fading dynasty, and that's really it. Now, just to look at some, positive stuff to come out of this kind of negative segment so far. The Los Angeles Clippers, talked about them before, how they have just been struggling. James Harden's been putting it on their back, but Kawhi Leonard is back. He's been averaging 29 points per game on 50, 40, 94 splits since he returned in late November. And, don't look now. They started out 6-21 one of the worst teams in the league, but they've had wins over the Rockets. They won over the hot Pistons twice, obviously the Lakers, and now they've been 12-2 since that 6-21 start. And Kawhi Leonard in that 12-2 stretch, averaging 32.7 points per game. And then Harden, the guy who is single-handedly stopping the Thunder's dynasty from continuing with a high pick in the draft. He's been averaging 24.8 points and then 7.8 assists on the season. But the only thing that's unfortunate for the Clippers is that the fact that that 6-21 start have made them stuck in a hole that is probably going to keep them in a play-in spot for the rest of the season. There's some odds that say that it could happen, but I just think that it's too far in the season now to be able to jump back up to that top 6 seed. And so we're going to see a Clippers team that might be dangerous later in the play-in, but how many heads can they turn come playoff time? But Kawhi Leonard's been proving people wrong. He's been on the healthier side now that he's come back. And James Harden's still been just a dog, and he's been really taking in that true point guard role ever since he left Houston, and it's just really impressive stuff from James Harden. But just need the rest of the Clippers to figure it out. Even Zubac had some pretty big games, and he's a top 10 center, and he's doing his thing for them, and that's a big reason why they're going on. That's a big reason why they're on their way up now, especially with Kawhi Leonard being back, James Harden still doing his thing, Zubac just being top 10 center. This is a team that has a good direction, but how much of a hole do they already dig themselves into? Now, probably the biggest question for me as an NBA fan is, do the Timberwolves make a move at the trade deadline? Because their biggest need, they still need a true point guard. They've been linked to the Chicago Bulls with Ayo Dosunmu and Kobe White, and there's been other links to the Atlanta Hawks, Dallas Mavericks, Detroit Pistons, but it's go time. We got to get Anthony Edwards a true point guard for the foreseeable future. How much success has this Timberwolves team had already without a point guard? Can you imagine if they just add someone into their system that's going to bring them to the next level? They've been to the Western Conference Finals before. They've been to it multiple times, actually. They can get over that hump, not just from Anthony Edwards, who's already been a star. He's already been MVP caliber. He's already rising up the ranks in the MVP vote this year alone. They need a point guard. In my opinion, they need a point guard. But John Krasinski of The Athletic believes that the Wolves do not need to make a trade. It's not imperative for them because they're approaching the second apron of NBA salary figures. So they can't get a guy like Ja Morant. They can't get a LaMelo Ball who's going to probably fit right in with Anthony Edwards. And the Wolves already have pretty solid depth with 10 players averaging double-digit minutes. And I mean, there is a point to make that they're already a pretty good, gritty, aggressive defensive team, but I think that all you have to do is add Colin Sexton to the mix. And this is what Krasinski was also saying, that if you just grab Colin Sexton, who's been performing pretty well this year, he's shooting 69.8% at the rim, and he's 49% on catch-and-shoot threes. Plus, he's a better two-way impact than Kobe White would be coming to Minnesota. And I just think that Colin Sexton, a guy who I've always rooted for ever since he was on the Cavaliers, he went to the Jazz, that's a guy that he will bring you winning basketball, especially for the Timberwolves, who just need that point guard, someone that can be aggressive, someone that can be there in those big moments, someone that can help out Anthony Edwards, can dish him the ball, but can also dish him the ball, then get right back on defense. And that's just something that the Timberwolves need, especially if they want to use this system, and if they want to use this system and continue on into the next stage of playoff basketball and the next apron of competing. But, I mean, the biggest question alongside that would be, how much do they really want to get rid of Mike Conley? Because if they get a point guard, it's the possibility that you'll probably have to get rid of Mike Conley. And he's had great veteran presence to the team. But, I mean, a deal for a guy like Colin Sexton, it might involve Mike Conley, and we've talked about him before, but Rob Dillingham. It's going to include both of those players, and it's going to be, again, another thing to watch out for. So we have to watch out for a move by the Knicks, maybe moving Cat away. Watch out for a move by the Warriors, maybe moving Jimmy Butler, who's injured, but maybe moving him away. And then for the Timberwolves is going to be the same exact thing it's been all season. Can they get themselves a true point guard? Now I want to move on to 4th and 4, and divisional round is over. We have a lot to discuss, not just with the divisional round and predictions, but also national championship just happened. So let's get right into it. Let's start out with the divisional reactions. First game of the slate was Broncos-Bills. Broncos won 33 to Bills 30. And I mean, the Bills, they had this game overall, and I predicted them to win by 3. But I mean, how much can you do when you have Josh Allen with maybe his worst playoff performance? 4 turnovers by the reigning MVP. It just won't cut it. And I mean, there's been a discussion about his resume, that he's the new Dan Marino, that he will always have what it takes to be a Super Bowl winning quarterback, a guy who has the clutch factor, this and that, but when his team isn't built correctly around him, and just the fact that, I don't know, there were some shady calls there in the game. I mean, I think that there were these 2 kind of BS pass interference calls at the very end for the Broncos that just kind of led them down the field and let them get that field goal in overtime. But I mean, when Josh Allen, he can't get past Mahomes already. In the one game he couldn't get past Joe Burrow. I mean, we haven't really seen a lot of Lamar Bills action, but can he get past Lamar? That's the thing. Where does he stack up in terms of playoff success here? Is he always going to be Mr. Regular Season? Is he going to be the next Dan Marino here? It really is just kind of a sad tipping point, because I am a fan of Allen. I think that, again, he has the abilities, the tools to be a Super Bowl winning quarterback, and he's beloved by the league. He's beloved by referees. He has a good whistle, but just how much of it can be in his favor? How much does he need to lead the Bills? How much do the Bills need to start helping him out a little bit? And I mean, that's been a big deal, especially with Sean McDermott. He's now out as Buffalo head coach, and they're about to get Brian Daboll. I believe either that or Tennessee will get him, but Sean McDermott being out, that makes the Buffalo coaching position, which is going to be filled by Daboll again. I just said that. It was probably the most valuable one in sports right now. I mean, McDermott also kind of held my point talking about Josh Allen and how much is the team going to help him. He complained to Brandon Beane about the roster being bad this year. He said they're not a Super Bowl team. I don't know how much I can do to make them a Super Bowl team, but we're going to try. He said we're going to try. But the higher-ups in Buffalo just didn't like that, admitting that they're probably going to lose. What is the stage of weakness there by Brandon Beane and the higher-ups in Buffalo? What is the stage of weakness that your coach is saying, you guys did a terrible job this year? How much can Josh Allen do to put the team on his back and lead them all the way? I mean, we've seen Mahomes kind of take up, and I hate to do the Mahomes-Allen comparison, but we've seen Mahomes take up at least subpar teams that probably should not be there, didn't bring them to the Super Bowl, but that's just been, best case scenario. That's been everything just kind of lining up the right way. But McDermott's out in Buffalo, and I mean, I know they're going to get Daboll, but how much better of a coach can Daboll be over McDermott? In my opinion, why not just keep Sean McDermott? I was looking at the people that they were interviewing before, and again, they're going to get Daboll, so it doesn't really matter at this point, but how much better off can the Bills be with McDermott out, especially with, I don't know, he's just had sustained success. I get he hasn't led them to the Super Bowl, he hasn't led them to a win, but how much is that on Josh Allen? That's the issue with, coaching carousels and quarterbacks, and also just teams in general. How much can they help out the quarterback? How much can they help out the coach? Sean McDermott just said himself, we've done the best we can with this team. They're not a winning team. We don't have the best roster build. We have the wide receivers are nothing crazy for Josh Allen. He can't do anything. It's going to lead to him throwing 4 turnovers. And again, it was a bad game. I think that was probably, again, I said that it was the worst playoff performance of his career. It probably will be for the rest of his career, but it's just, how much can you do with a team like that? And I don't think McDermott was wrong in saying what he said to the higher-ups in Buffalo. And I don't think that he was, I think that he was justified in saying that. And I think he was justified in being frustrated. But now you've got 5 openings in the league. Again, assuming that the Daboll news does end up going through, You have the Cardinals, which, I mean, they just have a lackluster GM in Monty Austinfurt. They have a D-minus ownership. They have an uneven dynamic, and that probably is the worst vacant job, especially with, the Kyler controversies coming up and what they're going to do with him. And just, I know, like, that Cardinals team, they lost every game by a score. It was just, they had so many games they could have won, and they should have won there. But it was just, bad decision-making and uneven quarterback play. It's just a mess in Arizona. And that's probably the worst vacant position that who knows who's going to fill that. Then you have the Ravens, which, again, this might be the best, maybe besides the Steelers and maybe besides the Bills, who I just talked about. I mean, the Ravens have, obviously, Lamar Jackson. He's going to win you games. They have a Super Bowl-worthy roster. They should have been a division winner this year. They should have been in the playoffs. They just need line work on both sides, like offensive line, defensive line, but that's just up to the draft. I think the Ravens have a good head coaching vacancy there. That's one that should be filled soon, but it's going to be, again, hard shoes to fill from Harbaugh and hard shoes to fill from Todd Monken there for the offensive side. But third, you have the Cleveland Browns, which is just, I mean, I said the Cardinals were the worst job vacancy, but the Browns are just an impossible job. Kevin Stefanski did all he could there, in my opinion, but it's just an impossible job, especially, they have no quarterback safety. They got rid of Baker Mayfield all those years ago, and everyone they get, I mean, I don't like to praise Deshaun Watson at all, but he comes in, he gets injured right away. It's just, what can you do there? There's just no luck in Cleveland. That's just not a good job position. Number 4, the Las Vegas Raiders, which, I mean, besides the fact that they move on from coaches just so quick. They got rid of Pete Carroll right away. They do have the number 1 overall pick. Mendoza's going to be there. He's clear-cut number 1 overall pick, and he's going to turn around that offensive talent, hopefully. But, I mean, again, no offensive line. We talked about this before. Their defense is a little atrocious, but that's going to be a tough job to stick with, especially if you're looking into that Raiders job. So whatever coach ends up going there, they got to hope that Mendoza can just lead them to have some job security there, because they move on so quickly from head coaches there in Las Vegas. Now, the 5th and final coaching vacancy, as at the time I'm recording this, is the Pittsburgh Steelers, which I would say is the hardest shoes to fill, just because Tomlin had so much consistency. You want to come in and either commit to the rebuild, you want to continue that success, or build onto what the team really can do. And who knows what the future is in Pittsburgh? Who knows what their quarterback's going to be? But the good thing is they're a really good organization. They're a really highly coveted organization in the NFL. Maybe the best job, just based on how good the organization is, how good the coaches usually are, and their just overall consistency and ownership, consistency and coaching. So it's going to be hard shoes to fill. It's definitely a job that will take the toughest of any coach, the toughest minds, but that's a good spot to be interviewing for. So if I had to rank these spots, I would probably say the best would be, it was the Bills, but I would probably say the Steelers are 1, Ravens are 2. The next 3 are hard. I would probably go Raiders 3, Browns 4, and then Cardinals 5, just because the Cardinals are always just mid. They're never good, bad. It's just, they're so up and down, and that's reflected in just the Kyler Murray saga. And I'm a big Kyler guy. I root for Kyler Murray, but it's just like, it's just been so up and down there. They had a season that they were undefeated to start it out in 2021, 2022, I think. And it just went downhill quickly. And they had a talented roster. So they need to get a better organization just in general there. And that's the way you break that drought. Because you have talent. You have guys like Kyler Murray. You had guys like DeAndre Hopkins. Even on the defense, like J.J. Watt. It's just, how much can you do there with that organization just being so dysfunctional and uneven there? So, but overall, if I had to get back to the main point, the Buffalo Bills could have and should have won this game, but there's a lot of blame to be taken on Josh Allen. I think that's a little bit of a crybaby move that he was, crying in interviews, and is, how much how many times are we going to see Josh Allen with the disappointed look on his face on the bench? That's all I'm going to say. Broncos won this game. The NFL, I think, wanted the Broncos to win this game. But now Bo Nix is hurt, probably some voodoo magic. And, I mean, this was also an avoidable injury if the refs just counted scores, if they counted certain plays as happening. But this was a winnable game by the Bills. And the Broncos did struggle against them. So, again, I think this would have been the Bills' AFC this year if Josh Allen didn't do what he did. And that might be harsh. That might be an over-exaggeration. That might just be me being a little more blunt with what I'm going to say. But that's just the way I saw it when I watched that game. Next up on that Saturday night, we had just Seahawks completely destroying the 49ers, 41-6. I told you, and I'm going to keep saying this, and I've been saying this since the entire time I've had the podcast. The Seahawks offense is lethal, and their defense is even more lethal. It's just been a complete shutdown of the 49ers. It's a shame because this is what should have happened in the Eagles game. And I mean, just that Seattle playoff atmosphere is just absolutely electric. And I think that it's time to give Sam Darnold his flowers for just completely turning around two franchises, two teams in back-to-back years with Minnesota and now Seattle. It doesn't matter if he's an all-time player. It doesn't matter if he's not an above-average quarterback. But he sets the culture. He's had, 2 straight 14 wins through 13-win seasons, which is just absurd, especially looking at the way that Minnesota was and then looking at kind of like how up and down Seattle was before. But their talent is just clicking now, especially you see that with Kenneth Walker. He's here. He's arrived after, just a shaky Seattle run game all year with Charbonnet, who's going to be out. But now we're going to see more K9 touches, and we'll get more into that in the playoff. We'll get more into that into the NFC Championship prediction later on in the segment. But, I mean, the Seattle defense, they just forced turnover after turnover. They forced 3 turnover on downs. They stopped 50% of third down conversions, which was huge because the 49ers are a better, third down conversion team, and they've just been, unstoppable when it comes to third downs. But, I mean, this is just the stat of the game, and this just shows the dominance. They forced the 49ers to only put up 3.9 yards per play. So we'll get more into the Seahawks a little later on. I'm going to stop gushing about them for now. But probably the most frustrating game as a fan this weekend was Patriots winning 28 over the Texans, who only scored 16, which, again, this was a winnable game by the Houston Texans. This was a brutal defensive battle on both sides. The Patriots offense, again, they just don't look so impressive besides the Kayshon Boutte incredible snag in the snow. May, he still has just so many ball security issues. He took 5 sacks. He actually had 4 fumbles, but man, it's just a shame after, such an amazing defensive performance by the Texans that it's just wasted on CJ Stroud crapping the bed. He looked like week 13 Jalen Hurts out there. Just interception after interception, fumbles here and there. Then even Woody Marks had to, just rubbed some salt in the wound and had a fumble himself on a pretty good drive by the Texans. Davis Mills should have been brought out there in that game. I think at least in the end of the first half when they had the ball back with like 2:30 to go, just to give CJ Stroud a break. I mean, this was a winnable game by Houston, and it's just so frustrating to talk about because the Patriots are very beatable. And we'll get into that into the championship predictions, but the Patriots are so beatable. And the fact that they're probably going to steamroll their way into a Super Bowl without looking, that impressive to me, at least. I mean, their defense looks good, but just this MVP performance by May and just everything that we saw in the regular season, it's just not here in the playoffs. And we really should have seen the Texans win this game, especially because I wanted to see that defense go into the AFC Championship and potentially go into the Super Bowl. Texans still haven't been in the Super Bowl yet. They haven't even been past the divisional round, if I believe I have my numbers right and my statistics right. But the Pats O-line just is struggling against good pressure, and who knows what that'll bring them in the Denver game upcoming. But it was just an ugly game. Neither of these teams, no matter who won, should have better Super Bowl odds after that. And I will also say that the Patriots also struggled with their offense to capitalize off the many turnovers that the Texans had, namely the Stroud turnovers. It took a little bit of fighting to get scores off those turnovers. Last for the divisional round games, we'll talk about the Rams-Bears game. Rams win by 3 over the Bears in Chicago. And I mean, first reactions is that, Caleb Williams will be an all-timer in a few years. That play where he ran back damn near 30 to 40 yards back on the field and then just chucked it up, somehow got a touchdown to Cole Kmet. That was probably the most insane play I've ever seen. And it really reminded me of Kyler Murray just chucking it up to DeAndre Hopkins against Buffalo when he was on the Cardinals. And it's just, disregarding that incredible magic. Before I said the Rams defense was beatable, but they just kept stopping the Bears at the line of scrimmage on 3rd and 4th down. So I don't know how beatable they really are at this point. I think that we're really suiting up to be a more formidable NFC Championship matchup than we might have believed at first. But Kyron Williams is just playing redemption ball in these playoffs, and he had an absurd performance. And I would say that, Matt Stafford, he looked expectedly off in the cold, which is something that we predicted, something that we saw, and his record is so bad in the snow, but he just has the clutch factor. He just led that offense to get where they need to be to win that game. And I mean, my final thoughts on that game would just be, thank you, Caleb Williams, for everything in these playoffs, and we'll definitely see you here next year and for the rest of your career. Now, to the exciting stuff, my conference champion predictions. To begin with the AFC, I have the Patriots winning 17 to Broncos 13 at Mile High Stadium. And I have a lot of notes, and my notes for this game would point anyone to say that the Broncos are going to win this game. So first off, the Broncos are best in the NFL for sacks, and May has taken plenty of those over the playoff push, and especially just with that O-line has been struggling. That's really the main stat that I wanted to bring up against the Pats. Again, I talked about in the divisional reactions that his ball security hasn't been the best, that he hasn't looked at his sharpest. And I think that if he's just taking, pretty solid defenses with the Steelers and then, the heavy defense by the Texans and the Broncos back to back against, pretty good defenses in the NFL, probably the best defenses in the NFL, I think that he might begin to crumble under pressure. He might not have that perfection factor that he usually has, but the pass rush will be lethal against Drake May. But then you have the other side of the coin, and that's Bo Nix being out, which sucks terribly for the Broncos because if Bo Nix is in this game, I think Broncos win. I think it'll just be Broncos 17, Patriots 13. And it still might be that flip-flop. I still think that this is going to be a closer game than people imagine. But now you got Jarrett Stidham, who hasn't played a snap this year yet, besides the preseason. But he's not a bad quarterback by any means. So that's why I have some faith in the Broncos. I just think the Patriots just have more momentum. I think that they're just riding to do something this year that no other team is trying to do. So I think that if Denver wants to win this game truly and they want to blow this game out, it's all just mistake-free football by Stidham. Or even the Denver running back core. They're 7-0 this season when they rush for 120 yards or more. And the Patriots are also 0-4 in the playoffs when they're playing at Denver all time. I mean, I think I read an article talking about the most recent year that the Broncos were in the Super Bowl. It was AFC Championship against the Tom Brady Patriots, and they were such big underdogs against the Patriots, but they ended up winning that game just because of playoff atmosphere, even when they were a pretty outnumbered team against the Patriots. So maybe history's on their side. And I will say, the Broncos are incredibly resilient. Again, the Bills win was their 13th overall in the season, including regular season and playoffs. That was a comeback. So this is going to be a gritty game. And I think that even though the history and the stats of it aren't on the Patriots side, I think the Pats end up pulling out of this one. It's going to be an ugly one. Again, like I said, both AFC games last week, but I really, I think whatever team wins is just going to be scraps for the Seahawks and Rams to play with in San Francisco. And now we get to the real Super Bowl of the NFL this year, and that would be NFC Championship, Seahawks, Rams, which I have the Seahawks winning 36-31 over Los Angeles Rams in Lumen Field. And I mean, that's a tight score. The Seahawks Rams have been the Seahawks and Rams have just been a tight series all year. I mean, again, you really can't predict divisional games in the playoffs. Both of their games were decided in a score and within a field goal. Both wins also coming as a result of choking from the other side. I would say that the Rams are the only team in the league right now that have Seattle's number. But, I mean, the Seahawks, they play flawless football most of the time. They played flawless football against the San Francisco 49ers. But they will lose any time that turnovers are forced. And that is the name of the game for Los Angeles. Yeah, I just think that, again, it all depends. Well, if Sam Darnold throws those picks again like he did that first time they played each other in the season, or if the Rams choke away their lead like they did the second time they played, which was the best game in the NFL this year, then it's really just a flip-flop of whatever's going to happen. But in my eyes, I just think that Seattle is the hottest team in football, and they're going to be playing in maybe the best playoff atmosphere in the NFL, arguably. And plus, they're going to have an extra day of rest compared to LA. And this is going to be a high-scoring game. I hope it's going to be a high-scoring game, especially because I wanted Bears and Rams to be a high-scoring game, but it wasn't. But I was also in the snow. I just think that the Rams will continually fall a step behind the Seahawks when that game comes. To finish out the 4th and 4 segment, I kind of want to talk about something that I haven't really talked about besides Clemson this year, and that's college football. Fernando Mendoza will be the number one overall pick this year, and that comes just from, kind of a reactionary response to Indiana actually going all the way and winning the national championship this year. But Mendoza has an amazing build and height. He has a strong arm that just delivers short passes as just absolute ropes. And he's not aggressive to launch the ball downfield, but he's able to use his body to pick up huge yards even when he faces big hits, which we just saw in the national championship when he ran to get the first down, then he ran to a dude, almost stumbled down, then just threw his arm down, got up, and then just ran it in, threw the ball over the line. So, I mean, also, when you look at it just from that playoff run alone, he didn't turn the ball over against any of those three great defenses in college football with Bama, Oregon, Miami. And so when you look at Fernando Mendoza, and some people weren't impressed by him until the college football playoff run, but Mendoza really reminds me of, I said to my buddy over text when I was watching the game, I said, Mendoza reminds me a lot of an underdeveloped Josh Allen. Maybe it was just his frame. Maybe it's the fact that he does have a pretty strong arm and he can use it, but he doesn't really, he won't launch it downfield all that often. I just think that he kind of reminds me of Josh Allen in those first 2 years of his career when he wasn't that good, but he definitely showed flashes of something great. But I mean, people have been saying that he reminds, most scouts, most people of a new Andrew Luck. Maybe it's just, kind of his personality, but also the fact that he puts his body on the line. He makes very intelligent reads. I mean, Fernando Mendoza has a very high football IQ. Plus, Luck and Mendoza both share a good arm and accuracy. But, I mean, if you really want to put, both the underdeveloped Josh Allen take and the Andrew Luck take and kind of mix into, one big comparison, I would probably say that the best QB comparison to the NFL for Mendoza as he's entering the draft would be Jared Goff. They just have a similar stature, and I just think they have, both of them are number one overall picks. I just think it makes sense. Now let's move on to the hockey talk for the week, and I actually do have a lot more to share this week than last week, and I'm sorry about last week being a short one, only talking about Anaheim, but I mean, how do you not talk about hockey overall as a sports fan when we really just saw the first goalie fight in the NHL in 6 years? Sharks goalie Alex Nedeljkovic and Panthers goalie, obviously, Sergei Bobrovsky, they dropped the gloves with 14 minutes left in the third. The Sharks goalie, he joined a fight behind his net because one of his players was hit who just came back from injury. Then Bobrovsky just got riled up and he got involved and he skated across the ice, and he believed that Nedeljkovic's reaction to his teammate being hit was too much and over the line, according to ESPN. And I just got a new stat saying that Nedeljkovic becomes the fifth goalie in NHL history to have a goal, assist, and a major penalty for fighting on his career record. So that's pretty cool. And along with that game, we also saw the return of Matthew Tkachuk, who returned to the Panthers, the reigning Stanley Cup champion Panthers, in a 4-1 loss to the San Jose Sharks. It was his first game of the season, and he's missed 72 games over the last calendar year. But a big thing to note about Tkachuk's return and the fact that he's trying to get himself comfortable again is that the Florida Panthers barely go over 500 in those games that he's missed over the calendar year. But when he came back for the playoffs, they went 16-7 and ended up winning a Stanley Cup in the process. So Tkachuk being back, especially with, a Panthers team that is just so riddled by injuries, and they're 4 spots out of a second wildcard spot in the East. It's just been a bad year with, Thomas Nosek, Tkachuk for the first part of the year, and Alexander Barkov being out just during the season. I mean, it's just a big piece coming back for the Panthers. And I mean, he didn't really do a lot in terms of production, but he was on the ice for 21 minutes, and he had 3 shots on goal in the loss to the Sharks. So we'll see what happens with the Panthers, and they're still doing better than expected with all these injuries that came up with them. Next up on the plate for my stick on the ice would be just more trade talk, this time in hockey, obviously. But Canucks center Elias Pettersson is probably next up for the Canucks to trade, especially after the Wild traded away Quinn Hughes, especially after the Wild traded for Quinn Hughes. And this will just be another trade to get him out of the worst spot in the NHL right now. So Frank Saravalli, a NHL insider, stated that there is a growing suspicion that teams are beginning to eye Pettersson. And he's had a down year between the last 2 years. And this year, he's only has 29 points in 40 games. But I mean, he's still in his prime. He's still only 27. But to be fair, his cap hit of $11.6 million is pretty high for that, mediocre production this year. I think something to note is that only 4 teams can actually get his cap space outright, and that would be Chicago, Pittsburgh, Detroit, and San Jose. But Joe Yerdon of Bleacher Report, a hockey writer, believes that the true destinations for Pettersson would be Detroit Red Wings. They don't really have any reliable center depth behind Dylan Larkin. And the Red Wings right now, they're second in the Atlantic Division, so that would be a big trade to bring them up and to hopefully bolster their Stanley Cup, odds and chances and contention. Yerdon also believes that the Utah Mammoth will be in the running because they have salary flexibility and loads of good young talent. And obviously, Logan Cooley's hurt, which opens up a hole of creative depth at center. So, and obviously, Yerdon also says that Pittsburgh is a long shot. He also mentions Philadelphia in there, but I think that if it's going to happen, it's going to be between the Mammoth and the Red Wings. Now, to finish off the hockey segment for the podcast, again, it was pretty quick. I'm sorry about that, but I kind of want to tie the NHL to the NFL real quick and talk about coaching turnover and short coaching tenures. So I read an interesting article by Ben Steiner for the Daily Faceoff saying that by the end of the 2025 season, the NHL had the shortest coaching tenure among the 4 main pro sports leagues with the MLB, NHL, NFL, NBA, that, with 2.38 years on average for coach per team. And this is just, Steiner himself had just curiosity of, the depth of, is there a true main team culture in hockey? This could be the product of social media negativity. And I mean, just being a Flyers fan and a Philly fan, I know that we always overreact to things. But there's also, more stats that are always added to each sports league over time now with computers getting more advanced. And just, the ultra-competitive nature of working today. Don Granato, who is a former head coach for the Buffalo Sabres, he said, quote, "So I think that's the biggest challenge. These coaches go before the media 200 times a year. What can you say 200 times a year that's going to make you look competent anymore, especially if you're not in the playoff spot? So it's really challenging. Media access for coaches is not changing, but I think that contributes to the challenges coaches face." And I think that overall, this could honestly be put into perspective for every coach. Coaches in MLB, coaches in the NHL, NBA, NFL, even like in soccer and those kind of coaches, even just in college, especially in like college basketball, college football, those guys are put before the media so much. How much can you lie about your team being good or bad? I just saw Ed Cooley of Georgetown was talking about their kind of bad losing stretch that they've had, talking about how it's just kind of saying that they're blessed to be there. And that's, one bad thing you can say, and that's going to lead everyone to think that you're incompetent. In public speaking, if you use certain words, certain phrases, you don't get your point across a certain way, even if you just get up to the podium and you don't really kind of have that professionalism, that's just a sign of incompetency, especially to the audience that are listening to you. So when coaches go before the media so often and they do these kind of, we're just blessed to be here, it's an honor to even be here, it's just like a double-edged sword. And that's the reason why, it's crazy to me that the NHL has so much coaching turnover. Again, I'm not well-versed in the coaches of today or who's coaching each team, but especially for hockey at least. But it's just insane to see that there's that, besides the coaching carousel for the NFL is always crazy year to year. There's always firings going on. There's always at least, 3 to 4 teams that have a vacancy at head coaching. It's just crazy, and especially with, a year like this where we're seeing Harbaugh being gone, McDermott being gone, Tomlin, just kind of mainstay coaches like that. It's just nuts to see that. And to see that the NHL coaching turnover is even worse than the NFL. We thought it was pretty bad in the NFL. It's pretty bad in the NHL. So that would be my conclusion for my stick on the ice. And I kind of like that, it resonates to all facets of sports, especially today with social media and all of that. Now I want to get into the Phanatic, and we have not the most talk about, but we definitely have some Flyers news. As you can see, I'm repping my Flyers shirt today. It's very cold here in Clemson. I was also wearing my Flyers sweatshirt, and the issue is my dorm building is so hot in here, so I was going to wear my jersey, my Zegers jersey that I just got, but whenever I walk around Clemson, because I have to do a lot of walking here, I come back to the dorm, I'm just sweating. So I opted for the coat instead, but hopefully that doesn't give us bad luck for our game tonight against the Mammoth. But I want to talk about, obviously, we talked about the collapse of the Flyers, the slow collapse that's just slowly been happening. But TK put the team on his back, though, with 2 unassisted goals to defeat the Golden Knights the other night, and they snapped a rough losing slide for the Flyers. And TK is on his pace. Now, TK is on pace for a second straight 70-point season, despite allowing the spotlight to be taken by Zegers and Michkov this year. He's still one of the Flyers' MVPs, and he had a great shorthanded play. And both his goals were unassisted. He really did just, grab the Flyers organization and just put it in his backpack and said, let's go, we're going to win this game. And that was just overall great shorthanded play by the Flyers against a really solid Vegas team that, this looked like the beginning of a really scary reality for the Flyers fans to face about how we're going to keep losing, and we're just not there yet. And we're going to be up against, the Mammoth and the Avalanche coming up soon. So, but hey, Ersan, someone who everyone was calling for the head of the other day, he comes in clutch. And he has his best game of the season. And this is right when, the Flyers' magic seemed like it was going out because of the goalie, because of Vladar being out. And Ersan comes in and says, hey, I'll block some shots. We're only going to allow 1 goal by Vegas, and this should have been more. This should have been probably another 5-2 loss for the Flyers. But Ersan, he pulled his weight there. He pulled his weight. And I think just looking at, the keys to the game that they had after by certain writers, they talked about how the Flyers strongly improved. They talked about how the Flyers strongly improved on their 5-on-5 team defense, goaltending, and faceoffs, but there's still some work to do in avoiding dangerous turnovers, better line changes, and careless penalties. And a good thing to note is that Bobby Brink is back, and he's a great player. He's a good addition to this team that's on their losing slide right now, but he played fine against Vegas with 2 blocked shots, a solid scoring chance in his 12 minutes on the ice, so it's really good to have him back. Yet, just to talk about the future of the team, Scott Wheeler of the Hockey Writers believes that if Jet Lachanko and Jack Nesbitt do not begin to live up to their impact, then the Flyers are still ways away from future glory, even despite Mitch Cobb and the next up Porter Martone being shining pieces for the Bullies. And it's just, it goes into perspective that this Flyers team, how deep is their prospect pool? We were so excited about Luchanko and Nesbitt, and it's just, they haven't really been playing up to their impact, and they haven't really, will they ever live up to that prospect pool? I've been seeing so much in the news about, especially Jack Nesbitt. And now that gets into kind of a sticky situation for the Flyers, especially with the trade deadline coming up, and the team roster freeze coming in soon just because of the Olympics. William James of Philly Hockey Now stated that the Flyers should go in for trading for Blues center Robert Thomas, if available. His no-trade clause is hitting this year, and he has 429 points in 508 career games, and he was pretty vital to their 2019 Stanley Cup run for St. Louis. And just because the Blues have been sellers, they've been putting guys up on the trade block, and there's just been more suspicion about them going in and trading guys. Robert Thomas might be available. He might be available, and he definitely would not be cheap, but especially James believed that it might be a package of anyone but Zegras, Martone, Michkov. And I think that, honestly, this is when you kind of look at guys like Luchanko and Nesbitt, and you say, hey, if these guys aren't really living up to their potential, and maybe they do someday soon, but we're in a spot where we have a roster that we can win. We have a spot where, we have Porter Martone coming in, and once him and Michkov, and if Zegras ends up staying, if they're all together, that's going to be a dangerous team. How much do you need these two prospects? So that's when the conversation of Robert Thomas comes into Philadelphia, because he would be a perfect fit in Philly just due to his two-way style of play, which would fit, our center depth, just because we have defensive-minded centers like Couturier and Noah Cates. And Thomas is only around 26, 27. He could be here for a long time, especially because he has a bigger contract, or a longer contract, I should say, longer duration. And you add him to the mix with his assists, and he could be a lethal passer to the offensive star wings of the team like Zegras and Michkov. And eventually when Martone comes in, that would just be so scary for the rest of the league. So I think that there's definitely a goal to be set for the Flyers and what they should try to accomplish here. And I think that if Robert Thomas is even maybe on the trade block, we should look into sending them an offer. Don't give up too much, but it would be good to look at it. Now, talk some Eagles. Again, there's not really a lot to say because there hasn't really been a lot in general, just because they have not been playing. There's just, AJ Brown controversy. No one really cares. No one really wants to talk about that. It's kind of overblown. I guess the only thing to talk about is the OC interviews. So we've had Zach Robinson, Brian Dable, who's now going to go to Buffalo or Tennessee. And then we were rumored to be interviewing Mike McDaniel, but I think he's going to be the OC for the Chargers, I believe, soon. Or if they didn't sign that, they will be signing that soon. But other guys that didn't really say anything about are Mike Kafka, the interim head coach of the Giants and the former OC there, and then Jim Bob Cooter and Josh Grizzard. And Josh Grizzard, those are three guys that didn't really impress me when I was looking through the candidates. And then even something that I was happy about was Kevin Stefanski goes to the Falcons. I'm glad he's not going to be our guy, because I was kind of worried that he was going to be just the next OC, whatever. But he took the head coach position there, and Brian Dable's going to take the head coaching position in Buffalo most likely. So good for them, and it's good to know that we would have dodged a bullet there because they would have been aiming to be head coaches again soon. But here's my wild card proposition. Here's my wild card proposal for the Eagles, and they already have a potential interview with him coming up, but that would be Miami Dolphins passing game coordinator Bobby Slowick. Anyone who knows me, anyone who's talked to me in the past few years would know that I was a big Slowick guy to get him in 2023, 2024, and he was notably the offensive coordinator for the Houston Texans in 2023, 2024, and I really wanted him over Kellen Moore. I really wanted him over, obviously, Kevin Patullo. And he was fired by Houston eventually, but he did so much in developing CJ Stroud. And you can see this year, without Slowick, we see a CJ Stroud who is just lost his touch. He's not confident. So let's look at the numbers here. In 2023, Slowick directed the 7th best offense in yards per game in the NFL, and he even oversaw C.J. Stroud's historic rookie year, and the offense had the fewest turnovers by an NFL offense that season. 2024, 3.7K passing yard season by Stroud, and also 3 other Texans on the offensive side being Pro Bowlers. I think that he's the guy. Maybe he lost his touch. Maybe that's why he was fired. But please give me Bobby Slowick. If we couldn't have Dable, if we couldn't have Mike McDaniel, and Zach Robinson was kind of the last one on my list. I wouldn't mind having him, but please give me Bobby Slowick. I don't even think that he was an option, but he's getting interviews, and that would just be a match made in heaven. My only fear is that he would be a head coaching candidate if he does really good with us, but he would fit, and he's shown that he can develop a quarterback, and it's proven that the quarterbacks that he was with, C.J. Stroud namely, he wasn't as good without him. So I think Bobby Slowick could be the guy that kind of brings us onto a steady rise and kind of keeps us consistent for Jalen Hurts. And hopefully, if he can stay for at least 2 years and kind of build, a culture here in Philadelphia, just like he did in Houston, that would be really good. And I think that he can bring us back to the level that we want to be at. Then lastly, I want to talk about the Philadelphia 76ers, obviously. I would talk about the Phillies, but one, I'm not the best with Phillies baseball, and there's just too many numbers involved in that, but I'm very disappointed by their offseason so far. But Sixers, most recent Pacers win shows a Sixers team on the rise. Tyrese Maxey is a new all-star starter. Congratulations to him. And he had 29 points and 8 steals in that game. And Joel Embiid, talked about him last week, but he had 30 points. He's been playing reliably. Dominic Barlow, we've talked about him before. He had a big game with 11.7 boards. And BJ Edgecombe, he's continuing to mold into his own kind of player. If this team can be consistent and avoid trouble against inferior opponents, the 76ers could definitely be a 2 or 3 seed. They've been great on the road. I mean, they haven't been the best defensive team, and they've struggled with weak turnovers, but there is just a case to make, especially with Embiid, and we're going to add a little more Embiid praise. And these stats are over the last 14 games. He's had 69% true shooting percentage and a 51, 30, 86 shooting split, and not to mention a plus-minus of plus 69. All I will say is that the East is wide open, and Embiid coming into his own, and that if he played more in the beginning of the season, he would have definitely been an MVP candidate. So I think they're going to be in a top 3 seed by the end of the year. That's my hot take, and we'll see. I'm very excited about it. Now let's go into the Clemson Corner to finish out the pod this week. Not a lot to talk about, but the biggest story of the past few days, and again, I always talk about this, but new article coming out for the Tiger and the Pursuit about Luke Farrelly being out at Clemson, joining Ole Miss, and it's disgusting. It's greedy, and it's just, I don't even know what to say. I think it was David Hood from TigerNet put it best, saying that this is a college football issue. This isn't just a Clemson issue that a guy joined the team and then left. There was an article from the Tiger talking about a quarterback or some sort of player from Washington who entered the transfer portal, then said, oops, I didn't enter the transfer portal, and he left it immediately. Luke Farrelly being out at Clemson is just, what's going on there? He's enrolled in classes. He's a sociology student here. He's been in classes. He has a Clemson email now. He's been on campus. He met the team, and now he's leaving, and at the 11th hour before the transfer portal closes. This is just disgusting. This is just sleazy, and it just reeks. This is just a reek of a move, and Clemson better press some sort of investigation to happen about this. And I think that this needs to be what leads change in college football, not just because it happened to Clemson, so it now that it's happened to us, now we're going to get mad about it. This is just something bad. This could happen in basketball. What's next? And I saw this, with guys who are reacting to this whole fiasco. What's next? Are we going to have, guys who come in to a new team. They transfer into a new team. They go 0-3 to start out the year. Or let's say even like Clemson, they start out 1-3. And then you got, one of the Woodis brothers. He's like, all right, I'll see you guys. I'm going to go to Ole Miss. Like, that doesn't make any sense. I bet you, and this is why I'm really hoping that Chambliss is, he's a good player, but I really hope that his appeal to get another year of eligibility gets denied, because we need to start having some floodgates against just this inexcusable and terrible and just sleazy poison that's over the college football scene, just over college sports in general. God, you should be there to get your education. You should be at a school, and if you're not there to get your education, you should be there to be at the school. What's the point of recruiting anymore? You might as well just recruit guys in transfer portal and not even care about freshmen. They can just spend that first year, the entire year in the transfer portal. They can just go to community college and transfer in. It doesn't matter. What's the point of this? And it's just so infuriating, and it's ruined college sports. And it's making me, less interested in college football, less interested in college basketball. Just there's no loyalty anymore. And Luke Fraley coming into Clemson, he was probably the guy that I was most excited for, so definitely hits a little more to home for me. He was the guy I was most excited for. He had an award to his name. He comes into Clemson, really meets the team, and then the next day he's like, yeah, I don't know, it's not my thing. Then why would you come in? It doesn't make any sense to me. But and to make things worse, Clemson basketball lost last night against NC State, so all my notes are wrong for the most part. But they're now ranked 18th, and NC State is a team that had a few votes of consideration for the AP poll. And they're just a very inconsistent team. Will Wade just has a weird culture going on there in NC State. So I don't know how much the Tigers will move down. I don't know if they're going to go out of the poll immediately, but they had rough guard play. They didn't really have the normal grit in that game. They had just terrible free throw shooting in that game. Brad Brunell was not happy, but overall in this season, I'm still pleased with how the team has been playing. They're 16-4 now. Now they have a loss in ACC play, but I still love that there's a different player that can be the leading guy every night. It just shows that you can really trust any player to be the guy with the last shot, let's say in a tournament setting. And I went to the Miami game at Little John, and it was awesome to see Carter Welling being that guy, putting up 18 and just being a dog on both sides of the floor. It was just impressive stuff. And I would say that Brad Brunell is putting on a show on how to coach, how to build depth in a college basketball program, especially in a time where transfer portal is the main thing, and depth is all you really can do as a coach. He really should be ACC Coach of the Year, even, barring the loss to NC State. But at least before the loss, they were 23rd in BPI, and they are ranked as 16th best defense in the nation according to these BPI metrics. So Clemson basketball is still on top. Again, who knows what's going to happen, what's going to shake up. I have to look into the numbers of NC State, and that's my apologies for not being prepared on if that's a quad 1, quad 2 win, but it's definitely up there because they're on the inside looking out for the AP poll. But rough time in Clemson, at least over the past few days, and the Luke Fraley thing gets me riled up, so please look out in the future, coming weekend, for the article about Luke Fraley, kind of going into that whole situation and the reactions and the thoughts about that, because it's ridiculous stuff. It is just absolutely ridiculous stuff. So, also, to anyone in Clemson listening, please be careful with there's supposed to be some snow this weekend. There's supposed to be a lot of ice this weekend, so just be careful on the roads and be careful walking. But with that being said, again, I know this was kind of a negative overall episode, just starting with talking about teams that are on the collapse in the NBA, and then coaching turnovers and just players choking in the playoffs, and then Luke Fraley and all this and that and all that crap. But there's still amazing things to look out for in the world of sports. And while college sports may not be the most pleasurable thing to think about or talk about, especially if you kind of like the loyalty of it, if you kind of like, playing for your program and playing for your team, this has definitely been a very frustrating season, especially with all the lawsuits that are going to come this offseason. But congratulations to the Indiana Hoosiers for winning the national championship. And congratulations to Miami for not letting them destroy them. It was actually a really, really close game, one to watch to the very end, which I didn't expect it to be. But overall, it was a really fun season in college football. Maybe not for Clemson, but it was just a fun season. Just so far, it's been a fun season in sports for all leagues. So, thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching. I hope you all have a great upcoming week. And let's hope that my predictions of the championship rounds are right. And there'll be a post coming out on Instagram for that pretty soon. Please follow the Instagram. The link will be in the description. So, again, I just thank you all for watching. This has been The Pursuit. I've been Calvin. Go Tigers, first and foremost. Go Flyers. Go Sixers. Go Birds. And they disappointed me, but go Phils. See y'all.